Welcome csc102. This is Ex03, which is our grades sheet, and I'll be doing this with Google Sheets for the first time. And right now I'm in my Warren. This is Documents and Resources Handouts, and I'm going to go down to Unit 8, at least for Spring 2020. And here's some of the things under Unit 8, Ex03. There's the instructions. There's a link to the playlist, one of the videos you'll be watching right now. The work file is also here. It's under coursework, but it's also here. And there's also formula notes. Let me just go over just a couple things. When we talk about formulas, and I do this more in the previous video for Windows, so I'm going to do this just real quick. I have a little section here in the notes about order of operations, which you should be familiar with. Also, just keep in mind that when we use formulas, we're going to use an asterisk for multiplication. We're going to use a / for division. Down here, when we use formulas, we should always try to use cell references. Instead of using absolute numbers, we should always use the cells. That way they can update. And if you change numbers, then the formulas will update and put in new numbers. You don't have to keep changing numbers. So when you have a formula, we can always put in new data. And the only issue that we're going to run into, and we're going to do it with this exercise, is that we have to copy formulas, which usually they update based on where they're at, except if they need to use a value from one cell that's not going to change, we have to put in little dollar signs. A dollar sign before the column and a dollar sign before the row. So we just have to remember to do that. So if you want to watch the other video for the Windows one, I go over this in a little bit more detail, but I'll close that up for now. And this is the sample of what our spreadsheet's going to look like when we're done. On the Windows version, we do a header and footer. I don't know if we'll be able to do that with Google Sheets or not. I don't think so, but you could put a footer and header when you print it out. That's about it. But this is what it's going to look like. We're just going to color code some stuff up here. Just put some shading in here, make sure they match up down here. These are percentage of final grades. We're just going to do a little bit at the end. We're going to alternate some rows here and just put some background color on them. And we're going to put the percentages here. You don't even have to put the final grades because I have them figured out already with long kind of formulas that are already in the cell. So you don't have to figure those out. So we're just going to format a little bit and then make sure that we do the percentages here. So that's the finished product. And these are the notes. Now these are the notes for Windows, and I'm going to try to follow these as best I can because I've never done this in Google Sheets before. So I'm going to try this out in Google Sheets. But what I am going to do is I have it right here on Documents and Resources. This is the file. If I click on this file, it's going to open up in Excel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it and do Save Link As, and I'll just put it in my downloads for now because I'm just going to move it over into my Google Sheets. So I'm just going to put it in my downloads for now, and I'm not going to open it up because it'll open up in Excel. And then I'm going to go to my Google Drive and I'm going to put it in there. I already have a folder set up for csc102, and then I have an Excel folder. So I'm just going to go here, and whether you're doing this on Windows or Mac or whatever, it doesn't matter. But here's my downloads folder, and I'm just going to drag this in this folder. So this is your work file. This is the one you're going to start with. So I'm just going to drag this in here, and it should upload. And there it is. And I'm going to open this up in Google Sheets. So I'm going to double click on it, and then I'll change the name. And I'll say Open with Google Sheets. And here it is. It's working in Google Sheets. It looks like. I don't see add-ons here, so you could go in here and say Save as Google Sheets just to make sure it is a Google Sheets file. That may help. I don't know if we're going to use anything that really matters right now, but that way when you see add-ons, you know you're working in Google Sheets. But this is what it should look like to start. And then if you want to go in here and change the name, I'll just put my last name, first initial, in there and make sure I know that that's the newer file that I'm going to be changing. And I'm going to follow the instructions here. And I'll probably have to do this in 2 videos because I don't want this to get too long. But the first thing we're going to do in here is we're going to do something called a sort because we have these names here. Now, keep in mind, a lot of times you'll have a last name in a field and a first name in a field. They're both together here by going last name, comma, first name. So we're just going to sort these. So I'm going to highlight by going right on the row number 5 through 14. I'm going to highlight those rows. And remember, when you highlight rows over here on the numbers, they go all the way across. And I just point that out because if you use background colors, they'll go all the way across. And you may not always want to do that. I highlighted the rows that have the names in that I want to sort. And we want everything sorted because we don't want to get them all jumbled. We want everything to stay with the person that it's supposed to be with. So we're going to go to Data. And they have sort range here you can do. But I think we could do sort range by column right here. We're going to do A to Z. That means it's going to do the last. A to Z means ascending. It's going to do the last name. So Johnny Cash will be first, I believe. So I'm going to do it that way. And that puts Johnny Cash first. And You could always undo and just make sure, but I know that he had a 0 for his first assignment. So this is in order now by going Cash, Cole, Garrett, and down to Yorn at the end. So these are in order right now, and we sorted everything. So all their grades are in order the way they're supposed to be. So they should all be linked together when you sort something. You can just sort something without the others, but we want them all sorted. That's why we highlighted the rows. So that's the first thing. Then we're going to change the row heights because they're a little jammed together. And to do this, actually, I don't quite remember where to change the row heights. Oh, resize rows. Okay, here's one way. I highlighted these rows. I still had them selected. And if you right click on these, right on the row, and they'll have resize rows. So go to resize rows, and that's where you get row height. I think there's somewhere else, but I can't remember right now, but that works. And we're just going to put in, it says 17 right now, so we should make it a little bit more. I think on the sheet it says like 16 or 18, but I'm going to put in 20 right now. It says default 20. Let's see how that looks. And that looks a little bit better. It's a little spread out, and if you did a little more, that's fine too. But 20 is pretty good, at least for what I'm working on. I think I have this in Arial 9 point, so that works fine. If you want more space, you can right-click on it and just do resize rows. And if you want to try 24 or something like that, that looks good too. It's spread out a little bit, or 22, whatever you want to do. It's not a big deal, just so you know how to spread them out. So I right-clicked on the rows that I had selected to change the row height. And I think that works with columns too. And I think that's one of the next things we have to do is highlight the column width. So let me scroll up here and notice that there's headings here that don't fit in there that we're going to have to fix. We're just going to make them go in a different direction. But I'm going to highlight, well actually before I do that, let me stretch this out a little bit. So exam's showing there. And then I'm going to go B, highlight, now these are the columns at the top. I'm going to highlight B through T. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to right click, and it says Resize Columns. Now they say 46 right now. Now on the sheet I have like 4 because Windows, or Excel for Windows uses the number of characters. Now this is using pixels, I guess. So let me just put like 40 and see how this looks right now. I'm not even sure. And that's a little tighter, and that looks fine. So we'll just put 40 when we're using Google Sheets, like 40 pixels. But keep in mind in Excel, it uses the number of characters, so we use 4 because there's 2 characters and we kind of do a space on either side. But that looks good. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to rotate the columns, these headings that are in B2 through T2. So even though they're kind of sticking out here, we have to kind of click in here. And if you click in the cell, you can see that email contact is in the cell, even though it's kind of sticking out from it. But that's what's in that cell. Nothing's in A1. But if you highlight B1 and then you drag across and you go over to T1, what we're going to do is rotate these. And they have a rotate thing up here. This little A thing has a text rotation. We're just going to make them go up, kind of like looking to the right and looking up. I like this one, rotate up. I don't like to read them down. I don't like to read them so that the letters are stacked on each other either. So I'm going to rotate up. And that looks pretty good. That's about what we want right now. So that keeps us from making really wide columns, and then we could still read these things without having them get cut off. So that's the next step there. And then what we'll do is we'll highlight some of these things just to make them look a little nicer. I'm going to take the second one here. Now, you can do the rows, but keep in mind when you shade the rows, they go all the way across. So instead of doing that, I'm going to highlight these. It takes a little longer, but I'm going to highlight here, and then I'm going to hold my Command key because I'm on a Mac, but if you're on Windows, hold Control, or if you're on a Chromebook, I think you would hold Control as well. And every other row of those cells, I'm doing like B8 through T8, and then I'll scroll down and I'll hold down my Command key or Control key, and I'll do B10 through T10, and then I'll do this one, and then it'll work out because the bottom one will be shaded. So I'm still holding my Control or Command key on a Mac, and dragging across. If you go up too far, just come back down and then leave go. Always leave go of your mouse first, or your trackpad, and then leave go of the Command and Control key. So I left go of my mouse or trackpad. I'm on a laptop right now. And then I'll leave go of my Command key. And everything's still highlighted. Now, I didn't do anything yet. So what I'm going to do is use my paint bucket, and I'll just use like a light blue color. I'll use the lightest one they have there. And that looks good. That looks fine so far. Although, I guess I didn't do the names for some reason. I'm not sure why I did the names. But I'll just click on these because they're just one cell. So I'll just click on these. So if I forgot to do that, I could just go over and do that. So that looks okay. So I have all the names, and if I wanted to put the names in bold, I could do that or make them bigger. But that's what I want so far. So now what we're going to do is start working on some calculations. So this looks okay so far, although we're going to probably do some coloring later, but actually since we're doing color I might as well do it now. So I'm going to highlight all the A's. So it's A1 through A10, and I'm going to go to the paint bucket and use like a salmon color. I'll use this real light one, kind of like a light orange. And then I'll highlight the P's, P1 through P5, and I think on my sample I do that like a green or something, like a light green. So I'll do like a light green here, and then for the final exam I do like a light red. So I'll just find like a light red there. It doesn't matter, just as long as it's not too dark or anything like that. So that looks okay. So I have all my shading done so far, and we're going to do shading down here. We'll do the same shading here, but right now I won't worry about that. Let's add up some things here. So we're going to put the total of these are basically the possible points. We're going to total these all up. So if you remember from the last exercise, we go on the total cell, and you select that cell where you want to total everything up, and we want to total everything up from the left. So we're going to go there and go to this little sigma symbol here for the functions, and I'm just going to use sum. Now you can put in values, you can basically write formulas, or you can highlight the cells that you want, and I'm just going to highlight all these things here, and that'll add everything up. So in B3 through Q3, I'm just going to highlight those and then hit your enter key. And the total is now 350. Now we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to total these up. So now you could drag this down, but I'm just going to go here and sum that up again. And I'm going to do sum, and I'll do the same thing. I'll highlight these cells all the way across, and then I'll hit enter. And you can see that Johnny Cash had a 315. And now what you can do is if you highlight that cell and get that little thin plus sign and just drag down, and you should have numbers like 315, 249, 236. Those are right. And if you're not sure, double check. Like just click in the middle here and look at the formula. The formula says B9 through Q9. So is that right? That's B9 through Q9. That's correct. So you have the right numbers there. So you could just double check these and make sure they're all kind of under 350, which they will be. So the next thing we're going to do is the percentage. Now this is a little tricky because we're going to copy the percentage, but it's always going to be dividing the larger number. So you're always going to have the small number divided by the larger number. So just for example, if you got 9 out of 10 on a quiz, you would divide 10 into 9, and it would be like 0.9. You wouldn't divide 9 into 10 because that would be like 1 point something. So it's always the smaller number divided by the bigger number. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to write our own formula here in the percentage for this one. We'll just start with 1. So we'll go here, and instead of doing the sum thing, we'll just follow the way it was. And if you're not sure, just look here. It says equals sum, and then it has B5 through Q5. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do that same thing. We're going to say equals sum, this cell divided by that cell. This will be the second cell. So if I just do it, but it's going to go here. This is where our percentage is going to be. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say equals sum, then in the parentheses, I'm going to say I want the smaller value divided by the bigger value. Now the smaller value is going to be R5. And if you can't see it, this is kind of covering it up, but it's R5 here. So I'm going to put in R5, and you could use lowercase, and then I'm going to put divide, which is a slash. Now you might say, well, why are you using sum? Yeah, it's just going to get the value of whatever we divide here. So you could still use sum even though you're not just doing addition. So we're going to divide R5 by R3. And R3 is this one here, R3. Now the thing is, and I'll just do it like this. First, if I hit enter, it's going to come up to 0.9, which is fine. That's actually the right grade. And then if you go over here, they have a percent thing. You could put it at 90%, and then you could even take down the zeros. If you want to leave like one decimal place there, you can do that. That's fine. So I'll leave 1 decimal place there. I could even stretch it out a little bit. Now, the problem is if I go to copy this, it's going to copy the same kind of position of where the others are at. It's going to copy like nothing here. So it's going to mess it up. So I'm going to do this once just to show you that it's messed up. I'm getting an error. I'm getting things over 100%. So I do not want that. So I'm going to undo that and go back. Now what I have to do while I'm still on this cell is I just have to change this. And just like I showed you on that sheet, I just have to put a $sign here. And that's going to kind of keep that so that won't change. because that's the one that's not going to change. So you put the dollar signs to lock it in to that column, which is R, and the row, which is 3. So you're putting the dollar sign there to lock it in. And it's not going to change the value, so you could hit enter again. But now, when I copy this, it's always going to keep this value. So it's going to be R6 divided by that. It's going to be R7 divided by that. Now when I copy it, you can see they're more normal grades now. And they even update it over here because there's a formula in here, which I didn't ask you to write that formula. I just put it in there. So these are working out right now in that mode. And if you're not sure, just click in here and you can see they're always using that same value for the larger value for the possible points. So it's always locking into that 350. And notice you don't want to use 350 because what if, you know, these change or something? So if the numbers change, these formulas will always be the same. This one is using R9 and it is R9. It's row 9 that we're working on. So that's why we know things are okay here. So that's what it should look like. It should have like 90, 71, 91. Whether you have the extra decimal place or not a big deal. All right, so let me stop here, and that'll be the end of part 1, and then we'll finish this up in part 2.